Imagine leading a Formula One World Championship, then watching it all slip through your fingers. Not in one catastrophic moment, but through a slow, painful unraveling of confidence, pace, and trust. That's Oscar Piastri's story right now, and after weeks of silence, he's finally opened up about what really happened, and why Baku might have been the beginning of the end. He called it the worst weekend I've ever had in racing. And that line tells you everything. This wasn't just a bad result. This was a collapse. One that cracked the armor of one of F1's most promising young talents. A collapse that might have just cost him the world title. The fall began in Azerbaijan, a weekend that should have been forgettable, but turned unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Oscar tried to explain it. You can hear the pain behind the calm, a combination of quite a few things, he said. The race before that was Monza, which I didn't feel was a particularly great weekend from my own performance. And there was obviously what happened with the pit stops. Then came Baku. Friday was tough. Things weren't working. I was overdriving. I wasn't very happy with how I was driving. From the start, it just felt wrong. We had an engine problem in FP1 that kind of unsettled things a bit. We were on the C6 tyres that weekend, which are now notoriously tricky to handle. What unfolded was a driver spiralling under pressure. Ultimately, I felt like on Saturday my pace was very good, but I was just trying a bit too hard. That led to a crash in qualifying. Then, on race day, a jump start. Trying to pinpoint which one of those is the cause and which one is the effect, we'll never know, he admitted. But he did know one thing. Baku was the perfect storm of quite a few things. That was the worst weekend I've ever had in racing, but probably the most useful in some ways. There it is. The contradiction. The crash course in humility. The painful weekend that taught him more than any win could have. And yet, the numbers that followed have been brutal. Before the Dutch Grand Prix, Piastri led the championship by 34 points. Now, he trails Lando Norris by 24. That's a swing of 58 points in just 6 races. And during that time, Oscar hasn't even touched the podium. Not once. His best finishes? 5th place. Over and over. Earlier in the season, even a bad day still meant 2nd or 3rd. Now, he's getting beaten by Verstappen, the Ferraris, the Mercedes, and most painfully of all, his own teammate Lando Norris now leads the team. Not just in points, but in momentum, in presence, in raw psychological edge. In fact, over the last stretch of races, Norris has dominated qualifying, sprint, and race head-to-heads with Oscar by a margin of 14-1. That's not a rivalry, that's a rout. And yet, it's not that Oscar suddenly forgot how to drive. Something else changed. He admits it started at Monza. A key moment that most fans missed. A position swap between teammates. On paper, nothing big. But behind the scenes, that moment may have felt like betrayal. And Oscar, he doesn't lash out. He doesn't complain. That's not his style. Oscar is one of those people who doesn't let anything get out. Instead, he bottles everything up, said someone close to him. But the pressure builds. Every defeat becomes heavier. Every mistake becomes more costly. And eventually, the dam breaks. In Baku, he crashed twice. In Singapore, he hesitated off the line, letting Lando swoop past. In Austin's sprint, he was blamed internally for a first corner crash. Then Brazil happened. In the sprint, he hit a wet curb and flew off track. In the main race, he tried to squeeze past Antonelli and Leclerc and ended up punting one into the other 10-second penalty. Race ruined. Game over. Here's the scary part. Oscar has made more mistakes in his last 5 races than in his first 61 combined. He didn't become worse overnight, and Lando didn't become untouchable. But Norris has learned to shrug off setbacks. Piastri hasn't. Not yet. What's most worrying? The raw pace difference. It used to be razor thin between the McLaren drivers. Now, Oscar's laps are consistently 3 to 7 tenths slower. At Interlagos, it was 0.375 seconds slower in qualifying. That may sound small, but in a field where the top 10 are separated by half a second, that's huge. McLaren says it's down to track grip, that Oscar struggles more in low grip conditions. The team insists he's learning to adapt. They point to his long-run pace in Brazil as a glimmer of hope. And it's true. For parts of the race, he matched Lando's times, even while stuck in traffic. It wasn't all bad. It was something. But the question remains, is that glimmer enough? Or are we watching a title contender unravel before our eyes? Let's go back to Monza. The Italian Grand Prix. That quiet moment of obedience that may have changed everything. Piastri, running ahead of Norris, got the team call. The swap. Let Lando through. The reasons were dressed up in strategy, but what Oscar must have felt was something far deeper. That was the moment the internal balance shifted. He gave way. He played the team game. And he may have given up the title in the process. Because here's the brutal truth. If Oscar hadn't made that switch, he would now be leading the championship by 4 points. Instead, if he wins every single remaining race and Norris finishes second in all of them, he still loses the title by 2 points. One move, one call, one sacrifice. And that's the difference between glory and heartbreak. How does a driver carry that? Since Monza, the pressure has twisted. Piastri hasn't just been fighting the car or the competition, he's been fighting himself. And that's the hardest battle of all. Every weekend, the tension builds his confidence, already shaken, starts crumbling with each error. And what once looked like a cold, composed champion has started to look like a man trying too hard to hold on a lockup here, a hesitation there, overdriving in one corner, too careful in the next. It's the kind of driving that doesn't come from instinct. It comes from doubt, and it's easy to say, he just needs to forget it, move on. But how do you forget when every race reminds you of what slipped away? In Brazil, there was a faint heartbeat of hope. McLaren's data showed Piastri had real pace in the race. He lost time early, stuck in traffic and battling a flat-spotted tyre. But in the second stint, he actually gained 2/10 on Norris. In the third, he lost just over a second, but that was mostly due to being bottled up behind George Russell for 3 laps. That, at least, is something. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't fading. He was fighting. Still, it's not enough to rewrite the story. The truth is, this title fight has already slipped from his grip. Not mathematically, yet. But spiritually? It feels like the moment is gone. Like he had his shot, and it passed. And this is where things get complicated. McLaren is walking a tightrope. They have 2 brilliant drivers, both capable of winning races, both under long contracts, and both desperate to prove they're the future of the team. But now, the scales are tilting. Lando Norris isn't just leading the championship, he's leading the team. And if Piastri starts believing that McLaren has picked its favourite, the damage won't just be points, it'll be trust. That's the danger. Because behind every great team lies fragile egos, whispered suspicions, and scars from moments just like Monza. What happens next? That depends on Oscar. He's said himself that Baku, the weekend where everything fell apart, may have been the most useful race of his career. That kind of perspective shows maturity. But will it be enough? Can he rebuild not just pace, but belief? Can he face Lando on equal ground again? And here's where this story hits the heart of every fan watching. Because this isn't just about points, or pace, or pit strategy. It's about how we handle failure. How we respond when the thing we work so hard for starts slipping away. When it's no longer just about winning, but about surviving the storm. For Oscar, this is that storm. He's young, yes, he has time. But make no mistake, this season could shape the rest of his career. If he learns the right lessons, this collapse could become his foundation. But if he lets the doubts win, it could leave scars that never quite heal. This was supposed to be the rise of Piastri. Instead, it's become a brutal test of who he really is. And while the world watches the title fight play out on paper, the real battle is happening in his head. So now, we ask the question, can Oscar Piastri come back from this? Not just for the championship, but for himself. Because talent gets you into Formula One, but only resilience makes you a champion. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Is this just a rough patch? Or have we witnessed the moment the title slip through Oscar's hands forever?